I make illustrations that look like retro comic books, and in this video I'm going to explain my full digital art process and how I achieve that vintage look. I've actually been posting short form content where I colour my illustrations with halftones for about a year, and I get a lot of questions about how I do it and how halftones work, so this video is basically going to explain all of that for anyone who's interested. So I find my inspiration in a lot of different places, but the primary one would be Pinterest. I have a board where I save all the comic art that I like, and I'll typically look at that if I don't already have an idea when I sit down to draw. For the illustration in this video, I actually already knew what I wanted to do, so then it's just a question of finding a good reference. I'd seen a drawing of Cyclops on Instagram, I'll insert it if I can find it, and I wanted to draw him playing sports or at the gym, something like that. So I found this pose and that's basically what I went with. My canvas is almost always 2000 by 2500 pixels at 350 dpi, and that just allows me to print my illustrations at like a high quality afterwards. And the brushes that I use are from a brush pack called Chromograph from True Grit Texture Supply, and specifically this brush, the Palmer Sharp Softy. So for my sketching process, I start off with a simple skeleton, and a lot of the time I'll sketch it over the reference image as kind of a marker to make it easier for me to see. And then I just start filling out the anatomy. Sometimes you can look at the reference image and sometimes it's covered up by clothes or whatever. So you need to use your own knowledge of anatomy, which can be very difficult. However, I will put in some links to where I've learnt my anatomy in the description. But if you want to get started on comic book anatomy, I can recommend David Finch, and also a book that I have called How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, where they kind of break down the figure in simple building blocks. Another really useful resource here on YouTube is Proko. They do really detailed anatomy videos, but they're still simple enough to understand as a complete beginner. So you'll see here that in the sketch I've pretty much got everything down, and I'm just going back in on another layer to iron out any bits that are a bit unclear, which honestly in my sketches tend to be most of it. So I'll go in again and again to make it as clear as possible before inking, unless of course I get bored and move straight onto the inking, which I do a lot, but I haven't done in this video because I wanted it to be less confusing to watch. So I do pretty much finish the entire sketch before I move on to inking. And I think in general that's my biggest tip when it comes to the sketch. If you can get everything figured out and as clear as possible, you'll have a much easier time when it comes to actually doing the inking, rather than spending all of your brain power trying to figure out what the lines were that you drew earlier. My final tip for sketching is to always use references if you need them. You can see here that I struggle a bit with the shoes because I was trying to draw them from imagination, and I quickly realised that I didn't know what they actually looked like. So I went and found a suitable reference image and I drew from that instead, and it just makes the process a lot easier. There's no point in struggling when you don't need to. And now we're on to the inking. Now I have a love-hate relationship with inking. On one hand, I love the way it looks, but it is sort of a test of my patience. I spend a lot of time redrawing the same lines over and over, trying to get it to look just the way I want it to. And I think the most frustrating thing for me is that I actually prefer a looser line art style, but equally I'm a perfectionist. And those things tend to conflict because I spend so long trying to get the perfect line that I sort of lose some of that fluidity and my work can become too stiff and rigid. So that is something that I'm working on currently, trying to be a little bit loose with my lines. In terms of brushes, I use this pack here called the Rusty Nib, again from True Grit. In this drawing I'm using this brush, but I mostly use the classic brush liner and also the Wonder brush. Because I'm still figuring out my own style for line art, I don't have too many super useful things to say about this process, but I will say that if you're struggling, go back and look at the art that you love and really try and analyze the way that they use lines. You'll actually learn a lot more and be able to implement that into your process rather than just struggling by yourself. And I also think it's okay that just because there's something that you like in another person's work, you don't have to do it in your own. For example, I really like the look of cross-hatching in a lot of comic books, but I've realised that it's not something that I enjoy in my own work, so I don't bother doing it. And there was a period where I tried it and I learnt about it and I got better at it. But after a while I realised that for my own style, it's just not something that I'm interested in implementing, and that's okay. In fact, it's good because it means that I'm not just copying, I'm making decisions myself to create something that is unique to me rather than just copying. You can see here what I was talking about earlier, where I go back to the sketch even though I've started the line art, and that's because my sketch wasn't clear enough, so I just decided to go back to it, look at my reference again, and figure out the sketch so I'm not struggling so much with my lines. For details like this, it can be really helpful to work on several layers. With these laces here, I'll end up erasing lots of different parts, and I think that working on the same layer would just make it unnecessarily difficult for me. If you're enjoying this video, then please make sure to like and subscribe. And also you can check me out on TikTok and Instagram. I post a lot more over there. And I recently hit 25,000 followers on Instagram, so I just wanted to take a second to say thank you to everyone who supported me so far. I really appreciate it, and it's allowed me to be able to open my Etsy shop, which is super exciting. So definitely check that out in the description if you'd like some super cool prints from me. For the flats, I don't have that much to say because it's a pretty simple process. I create a new layer underneath the line art and then start filling in. Sometimes I might use the bucket tool if the area is enclosed to fill in larger areas, and then I'll use like a round brush for more detailed areas. You can see my colour palette on the right of the screen, and this is the palette I use for all of my illustrations, and it's actually important to stick to this palette if you want to be able to use the halftones later, because this palette contains all the different colours that can be made with the halftone brush pack that I use. Now, I did actually make a couple of mistakes in the flats that you might notice, and that's just because I was recording and I rushed a bit, but don't worry because I fixed that for the final image. I used this brush pack by True Grit Texture Supply called Halftone for my halftones. And you essentially use 4 different colours, CMYK, cyan, magenta, yellow and black, to create about 380 different colours. Each colour is on a sort of mismatched grid, so when they're overlaid they shine through each other to create different colours. It's the same way a printer works. So the brushes come in 4 different concentrations, and by combining these different concentrations you can create all the different colours. Now this is the layer setup that you need to use. It's important to remember that each different colour should be used on a separate layer. Cyan should only ever be on the cyan layer, etc, etc. And if you don't do that, the overlay doesn't work properly. So you can see here that I'm putting down yellow on the magenta layer and it doesn't create the correct shade. Whereas if I put it on the yellow layer, you can see here the difference. So now I'm going to show you how to create a specific colour. And you open up the colour palette that comes with the brushes and select whatever colour you want. So here I'm selecting this green. If you hover over it, you can see that little code, which is C4Y4. So that tells you that you need to use cyan 4 and yellow 4 on their respective layers to create this exact shade of green. So I'll select the green once I've laid it down, and then I'll colour it with the correct brushes to create the colour. first thing I'll do once the flats are completed is set that layer to a reference layer. And to do that, you want to click on this icon. So what that does is makes it so that when I use the magic wand tool to select a colour, for example his skin, it will select everything that is that colour within the reference layer, regardless of what's going on all the other layers. And that's really useful because it means you don't have to keep on turning off the line art layer, for example, which really just slows down the process unnecessarily. You want to make sure your magic wand tool is set to selection for referred layers so that it knows only to select from your reference layer, and that you uncheck apply to connected pixels only so that you don't have to click on each area of colour manually. So for the last final touches I'll do to make the illustration look like an actual vintage comic, I'll duplicate my halftone folder and offset each layer to mimic the misprints that you would naturally find in real comics. I also take one of the paper textures that comes with the Halftone pack and add it above all of my layers. I think paper textures is one of the most important things in making your image actually look believable as if it were really printed. And finally, I'll add some stains and splatters to the image to make it look realistic and sort of age it as well. I'm just zooming in here to show you some of the details, but there are actually a couple of mistakes on this, so here is the final image. If you found this video helpful or just enjoyed, please let me know. It's actually my first ever YouTube video, so I'm still getting used to filming myself draw and doing voiceovers and editing. If there's anything else you'd like to see from me in terms of videos, leave a comment, and thanks so much for watching.